All right, good afternoon. It is Thursday, February 25th, just after 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is actually a postponed ArcGIS Parcel Fabric Workshop. Normally we would have done this last Thursday, but because Brian and myself and Chris were all up at the Wisconsin Land Information Association conference up there, which by the way was a great conference. Good job, Kelly. We decided to postpone this rather than hold off another week. And so that's what this is. This is a rescheduled slash postponed ArcGIS Parcel Fabric Workshop. And what we wanted to do this time is talk about, I'm getting a lot of people asking me questions about, we want to create maps off of our parcel fabric, but there's certain things in the parcel fabric that with the standard structure that just don't lend themselves too well to producing maps off of there. And so what we wanted to do is sort of just talk about it. And really what I want to do is just focus today on a couple of simple things. One is, one of the things that we've seen a lot of our clients do is rather than trying to retrofit things into the parcel fabric, what they'll do is they'll just take and create their own cartographic feature classes, a cartographic line feature class and a cartographic point feature class to go and do that. And that solves a lot of it. And I'm just going to sort of demonstrate a little bit what some of them are doing. But then the other thing is annotation. And annotation seems to be a real point of concern for a lot of people. Traditionally, we've had annotation. I remember annotation in coverages and what we used to do with it. And the question is, with ArcGIS Pro, it's a new structure for annotation. So we're sort of at a point where if you transition into this new structure, you can't go backwards. So the question then becomes, should we transition? Should we move on to something different? Should we maintain annotation? Those sorts of things. And again, I'm not going to go in and tell you what to do. I'll just sort of show you some of the things that some of our clients have put together and some of the things that we've helped them put together on this. I call this building a cartographic parcel fabric, or how I stop worrying and love labeling. By the way, it's an old movie reference to Dr. Strangelove. Anyway, to begin with, the parcel fabric data structure is based on maintaining those data elements in here and not really about creating cartographic products. And we have two issues. The parcel fabric is polygon based. Everything that is stored in the parcel fabric, with the exception of connection lines, points, and some adjustment feature classes, they all have to have polygons and lines associated with them. In order to truly be a feature, a parcel type inside the parcel fabric, you have to have lines and polygons for it. And many cartographic features don't require polygons or require lines. And that's one of the issues on there. The second issue is that clients using annotation, and how do you handle annotation? And I will just say from the very, very start of this, I'm not a fan of annotation. Never have been. And those of you that have been in my presentations know that I often will just call it the way I see it. And to me, annotation is dumb, stupid text that just sits on your map. Yes, it's needed, but it was the way we used to do things in CAD. We had to put pieces of text on it. So the only way we could do that is we could go and insert a piece of text in our CAD file and tell it what that text is supposed to be, and then tell it how to rotate it and the size of it and all of that. And we haven't moved much further on than that within our current state of GIS. Annotation is still text. It might be linked back to features that are in the parcel fabric, but for the most part, it's just pieces of text out there. It has a specific scale on it, rotation and placement on it, and it doesn't react very well. It is just pieces of text. So let's look first about this cartographic feature classes. Again, one of the things that we're seeing a lot of is that we're seeing many of our clients put in place what they are calling just cartographic points in which they can go and put a piece of text in, not necessarily stored as text, but stored as a point that they can then have some control over. When does it display? What scales does it display at? What is the size of it? Is it reacting on here? Those sorts of things in there. And we're seeing some of that is being done fairly successfully. Like perhaps we want to go and have for example, lot numbers or block numbers or subdivision numbers. We don't necessarily recommend that, but we tend to recommend you just label the polygons. But some people we want to have our text at one specific location, and they're very concerned about that cartography. And again, I can understand that. But I also know that the more you want to have control over that cartography, the more effort you're going to put into it, the more time you're going to spend on it. So you want to make sure that you balance that out and recognize that it is this balance. I remember telling a story and going into a local client here in Florida, and they had just adopted the ArcMap Parcel Fabric, and they're in there working. And I did a follow-up a week later, and their people said, well, we like the Parcel Fabric. We like the way it handles our parcels, but we're still doing just as much work as we used to do. And I questioned further and said, why are you doing more work? What are you doing? And the response was that our mapping manager still wants us to go and put all this annotation in there. They want us to put the lot numbers in there and such. They want us to go and put them and place them so that they don't overlap. And after talking with the manager for a while, and it was somewhat, brisk discussion. Neither one of us sort of were giving way. I was suggesting to them that they shouldn't have their mappers go and spend all this extra time on there. And instead he was saying, no, we take great pride in the cartographic products that we do. And they're both valid, but the question was it worth the effort that they were putting in place? And finally the overall deputy appraiser came in and said, Frank, I just want to go in and make sure that you understand this, that when it comes to mapping efforts, some people don't like to have their babies called ugly. And so that, yes, they prefer to spend an awful lot of time on their cartographic products. So don't tell them it's not worth it. Instead, consider whether there's some ways to go and help them with this a little bit more. We have eventually gone back and figured out there are ways to do some things. For example, we'll have attribute rules and triggers that will fire off that will produce some of these annotations and make it easier for them to place them, but they still wind up requiring that their mappers go and place this anno and put it in there. Again, it's one of these things where if you're working on this cartographic product, you just want to make sure you understand what you're doing and how you're doing it. The general public doesn't always appreciate the effort that goes into these products. So just again, I want to make sure that we all understand these things. So what I wanted to do was just show some of the things that some of our clients have done. For example, with points, many of them have gone and done something as simple as this. Just putting a point feature class up there and then having, all right, this is what the label that we appear is going to say, and then putting up a domain and saying what type of a point are we going to be putting in there, and then going and setting label expressions that do things such as set the size and the symbology and the color of those points depending upon what type of point that's defined as. So allowing the labeling structure and all of the enhanced labeling capabilities to go and input that rather than defining just one annotation class and saying, okay, that's where we're going to put all of these things in there. You want to think about the effort that you're putting forth in there and whether or not it's worth it. They do the same thing also with cartographic lines, in which they might have some lines that they want to put in there. So for example, maybe there's a subdivision that they want to go and put a different type of labeling expression for a subdivision. So they'll go and create a subdivision line and say, this is my subdivision line in here, and then go in and place big subdivision text in there, and then go and actually size that up and define that subdivision text needs to be this big and this location and such on here. I haven't done that on this, but they'll use that, and then when they're done, let me get off of here, they'll go and not have that display at all, just go and have that text appear in that position. So part of the procedure they're doing is they're taking and replacing annotation with labels. All right. Again, you can split out. Let's go ahead and do that. Why not? We have time today. So if I go to label properties, and let's go to labeling here. Let's go and create a new label class. Call this subdivisions. All right. And on that subdivision class, let's go ahead and put over here, let's put an expression in where the line type has to be subdivision. All right. And on here, this is going to be purely the label here. And for, yeah, we can leave it at that. We can make it big. We can make it maybe 36 point and go ahead and apply this. And go back here to this one and turn this one off so that we can have something like this appear within there. Again, what we can then do is say, okay, well, let's go in and put one here. And this is smaller subdivision in here. And do this. So it's a way for them to go and develop something that cartographically they have better control over than just putting pieces of annotation in there all the time. This is one approach that you can utilize. We've also found that in here, and let's go back here and go to my labels again, go to this one here and set an expression And this is for right-of-way dimensions. All right, and label right-of-way dimensions in here. So on here, for example, they have they have lines that demonstrate what their right-of-way widths are, and they use labels to go and define what those things are. So in this case, they are creating a new right-of-way dimension, and they can just go in here and say perpendicular to this, and then go and attribute this as 120 feet. And they can go and have dimensions appearing, pieces of text that are appearing inside your cartographic product, inside your model, that aren't necessarily part of the parcel fabric, but at least worthwhile. Things like tie bars, to be able to go in here and create tie bars, which is a popular element here, where maybe you have and finish this point here and go over here. Another one here. This is just cartographic. It doesn't have to be related to the parcel fabric. It's just used for this element in here. Set your own symbology on it and such. And we go to offices, we find this is sort of the way a lot of people handle it before they get into fabric. When they get into a fabric, they get a little bit more concerned. Well, these aren't part of the parcel fabric. They don't have to be. The parcel fabric is only the procedures and the mechanism and the structures to help you create the individual land records. It's not there to help you create the cartographic elements on it. Those are part of ArcGIS Pro, and the tools that are in Pro will help you do that. You just want to make sure that you understand how to efficiently use them inside of Pro. All right. Again, we've seen this process used a lot, going and putting cartographic points in there. Maybe for a lot of our clients don't do blocks, which are groups of lots inside of a subdivision. They'll just have a point, and they'll put that point in there and say this is block number A, block number B, and such, because they don't want to go to the hassle of having a whole different parcel type for blocks in there. Interestingly, when we go across the country, some departments of revenue want you to go and actually produce block polygons. Others, they don't care about it. In Florida, they want a separate polygon for each block. They don't just want a number there. They want one for each block and for each lot for that purpose. They also want to see what's going on there more than anything else. So these are two of the approaches that we've had. And again, almost always it's take a simple feature class, lines or points, and create a domain, a subject, a coded value domain associated with it that you can use that for symbology. Optimally, you might subtype these, but I'm not sure you really need to subtype them as much as just creating coded value domain and symbolize them as you see fit on there. All right. So talking about point features, they're good for standard single labels. We have a client that utilizes they utilize annotation for addresses, and they actually put their addresses on every single parcel. And we suggested, why not just use point feature classes instead, and have a point feature class for every single address that's listed in there. One of the advantages of having a point instead of annotation, when you start doing statistics, start looking for topology to figure out, do I have points inside of polygons? Do I have an address for this parcel? You can use that with simple topology to go in and analyze. Is there parcels that don't have addresses in them? That sort of thing. Again, I like having point feature classes. I realize I've misspelled that. Point feature classes in there. The disadvantage is rotations and alignments gets a little bit tougher to go and utilize on them. Line types. Again, you saw a little bit, almost exclusively, they always use some sort of cartographic line type with a coded value domain against it. And then they have label attribution on them. They don't get real sophisticated other than for each of those domain values, they'll have a separate symbology, separate symbology and separate label class associated with them and utilizing them. All right, so for the rest of this workshop, we're going to be talking about annotation. Before I move into annotation, are there any questions or are there any suggestions, or anybody have any experience with using simple feature classes in association with a parcel fabric for cartographic purposes? You can feel free to unmute your mic or put something in the chat window.
Frank, when we moved over, we had parcel hooks. We had just lines for right-of-ways,
Right.
and stuff like that. And then when it evolved to where we could stack parcels, when a plat came in with the right-of-way on it, we put the right-of-way in as a polygon and started deleting the old way. So we've got both in there. We still use the parcel hooks, but I do the parcels, if the parcel crosses the road, I do it across the road, and then I put the encumbrance in for the right of way and then put a hook on there so you can see it, because I use a smaller line to cross the road.
Right.
And stuff. So yeah, we use both of them.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric is, well, let's start it this way. The ArcMap Parcel Fabric, because of the way it handled points and the way things were joined together, you almost needed to have road polygons in there to keep things from drifting and moving back and forth between them. That's not the case with the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric. You don't have those same sorts of issues, and we're seeing fewer and fewer clients actually building road polygons. Some of them do need them, some of them keep them going, but for the most part, we're seeing that because they're mostly associated with ownership, they're not as concerned with that. Again, we do have clients, so we're seeing sort of an abandonment of the road right-of-ways and utilizing just simple feature classes like this to handle some of that cartography, to tell it, you know, what's the width of this right of way, maybe even road center lines in there for street names and stuff. But we're not seeing as much road polygons being built inside of the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric at all on there. I'm curious from people that have moved over whether they're continuing to maintain those rights of way or whether they become a little bit more of a hassle than what they really thought they were going to be on there. You'll see in here, by the way, this is private roads in here, so they maintain this, and somebody's got responsibility for maintaining it. Whereas the public roads, they don't have them on here. All right.
Say, Frank?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Jenny Reek. For existing text, because we have a ton of it, would that then get converted to a line feature and then annotated into a layer and then added onto in the future? Or how would you suggest to do what we have already?
So you've got existing annotation, correct?
No, existing text.
How do you store that text in there?
As a text layer. Huh. And we're annotating it. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I think it probably is annotation on there that you do.
Yeah. Would you then convert that to a line feature and then into a layer and then add on to it from there?
Possibly. I mean, I would consider, again, I really don't like annotation. And so that's where we're going to start the next discussion. Why don't I like annotation?
Okay.
So let's start with that discussion. Why don't I like it? One, there's now this change where ArcMap annotation could be read by ArcMap, could be read by ArcGIS Pro, but could not be edited inside of ArcGIS Pro. Esri has transitioned to a newer structure. Now, the structure is nice for annotation. They've got some really interesting things they could do, but it's still annotation. The biggest problem is if you've got an organization in which you've got a hybrid implementation, some of your people in ArcGIS Pro, some of them are still in ArcMap. If you convert your annotation into ArcGIS Pro, it's no longer readable by ArcMap clients. So once you convert it into Pro and start doing editing against it, creating new ones for your parcel fabric and such, and for your maps, those ArcMap clients can no longer see it. And we struggled. How do you handle this? Believe me, we have searched high and low, including reaching out to some of the development teams at Esri. Is there a way to go and backfill, to go and export ArcGIS Pro annotation so that it's in that old format? And the answer is no, you can't do that. It's like, okay, so how do we handle this problem then? And we've gone through a couple iterations. Some of the best suggestions are, well, maybe you go and create raster tiles. Maybe you go and create tiles to represent what that should be. Matter of fact, here on a workshop, we actually went and experimented with whether or not we could use vector tiles to do that. The problem is vector tiles still have some issues with representing those labels well. Still isn't a great solution on here. So there is this, we're right now stuck between ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro. If you have a hybrid environment, which I would say a majority of organizations are hybrid, they have not fully moved into Pro yet. They're beginning to understand the benefits of it, but they still have a lot of people using ArcMap or that ArcMap generation of applications. So if you've got annotation, it's extremely problematic with those types of organizations. How are you going to do that? The other thing is that there's differences between the definitions of how that annotation is handled on a file geodatabase and an enterprise level. So what do I mean by that? If I have a set of feature linked annotation, all right, and I think I actually have it here. This is an annotation relationship class. All right, this is an annotation relationship class for a file geodatabase. In the file geodatabase, what it does is it goes and says, we're going to build a relationship between, maybe I ought to do my drawing here, between the piece of annotation and the actual line, so that when you have a dimension that's a feature linked annotation, it looks at the object ID, the feature ID of the line, and it links it so that if something happens to that line, the annotation changes. All right, that's fine for a file geodatabase, or even fine for an STE geodatabase. They use object IDs instead. But once you move into an enterprise implementation, it no longer uses object IDs. It now uses global IDs. So all of the relationship classes have to be changed, but more importantly, all of the relationships get broken. And that's sort of, okay, then all of your feature linked annotation that you used to have, it just becomes non-feature linked annotation. It becomes dumb, stupid text out there. And it becomes pretty difficult to go and maintain as you're going through here. And let's clean this off. Let's go and point this back. Because of this one here, this thing here, the fact that when you've got annotation on a server and you're serving it out using web services, that every call to every single one of those features is a separate stream going back and forth to the server. So when I go to search for a piece of annotation that's being served out by a server, when I connect to that server, that's one call back and forth to the server. When I go and double click it, that's another call back to it. When I go and open it to edit it, that's another call back to it. So that it becomes extremely chatty inside of an enterprise implementation. And as we're aware, the parcel fabric, the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric, if we're going to implement into a multi-editor type of environment, has to be in Portal and use web services to go into it. So it becomes problematic. If you've got annotation on here, and we do have people that are doing it. Matter of fact, let me see, Alex, are you still on? Do you still have annotation, or have you switched completely over to, go ahead, Alex.
We still have annotation.
But you're not in enterprise, you're just filed to your database, right?
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. Michael, oh, I'm so glad you came on, Michael.
Hi, Frank.
Hi. Can you share your experience with this?
So I'm sorry, I just literally logged on, so I don't have the history of what you're talking about. But
okay, let me fill you in real fast. So what we're doing is we're talking about annotation and the problem with annotation in an enterprise implementation and how it's extremely chatty and there's a lot of communication going on back and forth with annotation when you have it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we imported our annotation layers that we had been maintaining, since day one of creating parcel data, and it's a pretty extensive list from tax key number, acreage, parcel dimension, plat name, lot number, on down the line. And so what we found when we edit that annotation in through the feature data service in enterprise, through enterprise in Pro, is that you make a change to that annotation, or you even create new annotation, and it sends that request round trip, and it's a very slow process, and every edit seems like it takes 2 to 5 seconds. So I was mentioning to my colleagues here that I entered a 50-lot subdivision. It took me about 2 to 3 hours to do the line work on that subdivision, and another 8 hours to do the annotation.
Yeah, and Michael and I have been talking back and forth on possible solutions for it, but I'm not sure if we've got one yet. I think it's the identification that annotation in a parcel fabric, while it does work, it's problematic. There is some issues associated with it. And I was also mentioning, Michael, I really don't like annotation. So, but and we're pointing out that some of the options with just simple feature classes is that, do you really need annotation there, or do you just want to make sure that a point, for example, that a piece of text, a label, appears at a specific position? That's the difference. If you just want to make sure that a label or a piece of text appears at one position, perhaps you might want to consider using, cartographic type points, where you go and have those points in here. And I'm going to show you a little bit later, one of the things we're testing and what we're working through with this is that we actually took some, in this case, this was dimensional annotation, We actually took some annotation here for dimensions, and we exported it out so that it actually is just a piece of text on here. Now you could utilize that not just for dimensional information, but also annotation for blocks and lots and subdivisions and those sorts of things. That might be something to experiment with to see whether that's going to be worthwhile, because those simple feature classes are less chatty and they're easier to go and manipulate and utilize on here. Again, something you might think about doing in here. But yeah, annotation is problematic. It does work, but it is problematic because of all the communication back and forth before there. We also were talking about how the differences in the relationship classes between the feature or the file geodatabase, which refers to object IDs, and the services which require global IDs. So in essence, you're taking an existing data set, which is still valid, and you're basically corrupting it just so it can start working with a server. So you're taking and redefining all of your information so that it now works with global IDs instead of with object IDs. The problem is all of your existing annotation then becomes non-feature linked on it, which is still fine if that's all you really care about. But there are options you want to think about. So this is one of the things that we're doing in looking at this question: how do you handle annotation? Is there a way for you to take annotation and convert it into something that's usable? Again, it might be a little bit different, but it might be usable on here. And one of the things is this a geoprocessing tool called Feature to Point. And all we've done on this one is we've taken the parcel dimension annotation feature class and written it out as a point feature class. Said, okay, just write this out. Not done any work on it, no cleanup, no anything on here. And again, this probably is not the best solution for dimensions, but for other types of annotation feature classes like subdivision names or other things like that, it might be a good way to handle placing that text on your cartographic product, on your map. So again, let me go and zoom in here and just sort of show you. This was dimension. Let's turn off all the labels here. On here, and make sure nothing is turned on. Okay, and this is in fact annotation here. Annotation on here. All right, this actually has been converted to ArcGIS Pro annotation, and I can go and move this around and manipulate it and such, but it's annotation. So we wanted to experiment. Well, what could we do with this? How can we utilize this a little bit more? One of the things we did is we use this, just take it, export it out as a point feature class, and that's what this is here. We've gone and said, okay, let's go and put out the annotation feature class, make it a point feature class. When we open up the attribute on it, we can see all the annotation attributions, such as what's the symbol ID, what's the text string that's on here, font size, whether it's underlined, the alignment, the horizontal alignment, whether or not there's an angle on here. This might be worthwhile if you have an angle on here. Possibly you can use that for the rotation of your label on here. Whether or not there's, all the other annotation attribution on here that's in here. One of the things that's was interesting to me is here. the feature ID. If you have feature linked annotation, this feature ID should be the feature ID of the line to which it's actually located. And I can see in here, there's nulls in here, which meaning somehow this already has been transformed, because this is all of this annotation is now non-feature linked annotation. None of that links over to any existing feature. When I go and sort this, I can see, oh, there actually is some feature linked annotation in here. That's in here. But a great majority of it is non-feature linked. So again, annotation, you just want to be aware that there's other ways to handle this. So let's experiment a little bit. Let's see if there's something we can do on here. Right now we've got this in here. Let's go to label properties. All right. And let's first change what's actually being symbolized to, let me get back here, it's text string. All right. There is the actual attribute in there for a text string. Now, perhaps we can go in here and look at rotation. And in this case, there is an angle, but this is not allowing me to go and rotate this on here. So we may not be able to go and rotate this dimension. So point feature classes for dimension are not going to be something that you want to go and use. All right. However, what we can do is we can say, well, maybe a better thing to do is to go and take this dimension and capture that string value and store it over on the line here that's representing it. This line. And my lines are turned. Let's just see here. I should be seeing lines in here, and I'm not seeing lines. There's one longer line in here is what it is, as it was converted. So let's look at this line here. All right. If I look at that line, I actually see that there's the direction and distance is already 118.06 feet on here. So this subdivision matches what that annotation is. It's supposed to be reflecting of that. But the problem is that the direction field, the distance field, the radius field, the arc length field are all, as you can see, double precision floating point. As I scroll over it, you can see it's a double precision floating point type of attribute field. So you can only store numbers in them. Sometimes you want annotation that has not numbers in them, but you want to have string values in here. So one of the things that we're looking at is there a way to go and take a line, and rather than just putting a piece of text there and maybe linking it to the line, take that line and storing on that line a label, a string value, and then saying, go ahead and put that in here. And let's go back here and turn this thing on here. So that rather than just having this, you have this. This is a replacement for the annotation, but it's coming off of the line, not off of a piece of text that's in there. Something that can replace this. So let's look at something like this line right here, see if we even have it. I don't see the line at all in here. So obviously there's some line issues. Here it is here. Here's the line. And I can say, go ahead and put this in. And there is the label for that line that will replace that annotation on there. And how do you do that? Well, you can take, go and take these off. You can take the dimensions, which are here, export them out to points, and then calculate what's the closest line to that point that you've got in there. And then join those and attribute that additional attribution field that you put in there, and use that to go and store that text string that was in that annotation on there. So it would allow you to go and, again, take that and make it look like this instead. So that you can still have dimensions on here, and they would be reflective of what your annotation would normally say. But since they are then labels, you have much better control over it. You can set the size on it. You can set the, when it turns on, when it doesn't turn on. You can even do something such as this, where I'm going to take this line feature class, or excuse me, this line here, why can't I find that line? There it is. Take that line, I actually could do something like that, and actually put more than just the number on there. I actually could go and include in there additional information. So if this were a dimension going to the center of a stream or the center line of a road, or I could put some information on there that is above and beyond just the actual distance field inside of this feature class. All right. So again, we've actually got some clients that have been doing this for about 12 years now. They don't use annotation anywhere. They use labels throughout their system. Labels for dimensions, labels for polygon identifiers on there, and they utilize that. Sometimes they use a point label, sometimes they use a polygon label, and the software figure out where to go and put it. So how do you make that transition? Again, first thing is you can use a feature to point geoprocessing tool. And here's what the resulting point feature class looks like. Again, it's just a feature class. The critical element here is this text string attribute field on here. You can use others in here if you want, but that's the critical one that you want to really pay attention to. Then there's what's called a near geoprocessing tool. The near geoprocessing tool will allow you to go and, for example, take a point to a line and say, show me the distance from that point to the closest line and give me an angle so that I can measure that and figure out where it is. I can find where the nearest feature is. I can find a radius and look within a certain one, return to me the location or the angle on it, and how to go and do it, and what field names I'm looking for. The near feature will allow me to go and create and add to that point feature class where the closest line is. Closest line works well most times. It doesn't always work well, but it does work well most times on here. It will then give us the attribute, the object ID of that line feature class that we can then do a join and say, okay, take the text string from this point and store it in a field here in my line feature class. Any questions yet? There should be some questions in here. How to go and do this and what some of the limitations are on this.
Yeah, Frank.
Yes, sir.
This is Mike. So you had mentioned the point, the near geoprocessing tool. So I'm just thinking a situation where you'd have like a real short segment, maybe the corner of a lot that's maybe, I don't know, 5 feet, and the annotation text is 90 degrees with a leader line to that. More than likely, that the nearest line is going to be the longer line to the south of that, not the short segment.
Yes. Yes.
So is there any way to prevent that, or do you just need to do some QC to clean those up afterwards?
So then one of the things that you do is you can go in there and you can do a search, because that near tool will tell you how far away it is, and you can see whether or not it was close to a line or whether it's further away from a line. You can also then do an evaluation to determine, and we've got issues similar to that in here, in which there was a dimension that was actually supposed to be an extension of lines, that inside this data set it had broken up into smaller lines. So you'd have a dimension of 500 feet, but it was closest to a line that was only 100 foot wide. When we did that, it actually took that 500-foot dimension and added it to that 100-foot line, because that was the closest line to it. There was no actual 500-foot line in the data set when we went and did that migration. So again, you go back and you analyze it, because then you can start looking at the variance. What's the variance between the actual distance on this line and what that label says on it? How far away is it? Is it a valid dimension, or is it something where it's further off than we should be? So you wind up with a list of things that you want to go and evaluate and look at and say, well, is that really the correct dimension that I pulled over? Or is it one of those cases where we might have had a leader line on it, where we might have had something where we had to pull that dimension away instead of putting it directly on that line? Yeah, there's those edge cases. No matter what you do, it's never going to be 100%, because for the most part, the dimensions are put in there for aesthetic reasons, to try to go and make it look that you can actually go and see this on here. So yeah, Mike, you have that all the time, but it's something where you take the 90% and you bring them over, and then you start looking at that 10% to say, okay, what do I have to clean up when I'm doing this? And again, this is one thing you'll do once, not multiple times on here when you go in and making this analysis on here. That's a
Perfect.
Good question. That's exactly, that's some of the problems that you have with this, though. And you can see, even with this, you can see where some of these lines are very close and some of them are further away on here. And it just depends because of how these original pieces of annotation were placed, as far as whether it's something that will give you some really good information on here or not on here. All right. Any other questions? What other questions do we have on here? So then the question is, what are the attribute fields that we're putting into our line feature classes so that we can label them? And we actually have found from experience that what we really need are 3 different classes. One, we call it dimension label. This is a text field that we use, and this contains the string that's going to be used to create that label. First thing. The second one is one we call dim code, or dimension code. And this contains a coded value domain. And let's go in here and look at this. Here. This coded value domain is really, it just contains three options. None, you don't dimension this line at all. A dim, meaning you put a dimension on there, or a ditto. You put a ditto marker in there where you don't want to have the same number repeated multiple times, but you want to be able to signify from a cartographic standpoint that this value is repeated throughout there. Let me see if I can find those. Well, let's do it here. See where we got 120 all through here. By the way, this is one where obviously it picked up maybe this line here for it. So let's correct this. There is the line. Let's go here. This actually should be 120.00 feet, not that. 120.00. All right. We can see another one here, some more here. These picked up other values in here. Let's go in there and correct them. 120 feet. All right. And then we have, by the way, this is more than that. Let's just go and focus on these here. So now we have these values in here that we can go in here and say, rather than going put a dimension in here, just go ahead and put ditto marks in there instead, so that it shows that there's a repeating value in here and not, and I know that's really tiny. I should probably go and make that bigger in here so you can see it. Just above, let's make it maybe 10 points or so. All right. So here you can see that it starts out at 120, and then there's a ditto mark placed on all of these through here, and we can have it repeat as long as we want in there. That's one of the options that we've built into this so that we can label this correctly and show that as we go. We purposely are using a data set that we have not really cleaned up. We don't know what's in here. I just want to show you some of the issues that you might find with this. All right. So that's dim code. And then the other one is dim side, which gives you some control over whether or not a dimension appears. You can see how quickly I did this. Sorry about that. Appears above or below the line. So in here, for example, this one dimension here of 4D, right now it's being shown above the line. Perhaps you want that dimension to be shown inside this polygon. So you would go and say, make that below this line and make that show the dimension on here. And it would go and show inside now instead of above. We could also do the same thing here and make sure that the dim code is showing it and it's above on here. This one, you see that it picked up the wrong one. All right, and then this line here, that's where the arc length is there. So to go ahead and dimension this one here. All right. So with this combination of these three different lines in here, these three different attribute fields, the dim label, the dim code, and the dim side, you can control, you can at least provide some preliminary control as far as putting some dimensional information on your map. This is the beginning. This is not the end all. This is the beginning of these things. By default, it's always going to try to put it in the center of the line. With ArcGIS Pro labeling, you now have control over where you put that dimension. You know, do you put it at the beginning of the line, at the middle of the line, at the end of the line? Do you put space in front of it? You have all of that control in there. You also have the ability, and we haven't put it in here yet, but what happens if you have a shorter line, a line on which this thing doesn't fit? One of the things you can do is you can go and tell it to go and make that font smaller so that maybe it does fit on that line. Or maybe you can go and tell it to put a label with a call out on it instead. You can use formatting tags inside of your label to go and tell it where to go and put this on here. So that was using the near command on here. There's also an alternative way that we've been experimenting with on doing this, and that using Arcade, just with the actual dimensions. Thank you. So I just saw in the chat window, Victoria just said the dittos look awful not in a line. Why are they not centered? It's actually the labeling engine is telling it to try to find a place to put it where it's not going to conflict with anything else. Again, there's other controls we can put on there, but this is not going to go and replicate everything, because as you're changing your views, it's going to change slightly. But this is the one thing I disagree with. I feel like a little bit more control with labels, not total control with Anno. Yeah. Again, I understand that. I also know that Anno has got some real problems with it. Going back to how do you go and make sure that you capture those values in here, another thing we've done is we use Arcade and the intersect command inside of Arcade to go and use our actual dimensions. Let's go here. This is our actual dimension annotation feature class that we're dealing with. And we're going and doing an analysis against this dim labels attribute field in our line feature class and telling it to go and draw a buffer around every single line and then find all annotation within 10 feet of it. Now, again, we can modify this to be more than 10 feet and then tell it to intersect that and to go and capture the text string value and store that in the dimension label field on here, using Arcade to do it. So we didn't have to go and convert them to points and then go and do the near command on here. We actually could just use Arcade to go and perform that same function on there. Arcade is a little slower, but sometimes you want to skip a couple steps and just do it with Arcade. Again, using Arcade, you're able to do the same thing on there and analyze what's in there. So again, things that we can do with this is we can set where it starts, where it ends. We can set the size of it all dynamically on here. There's a great deal of options because of our labeling functions inside of ArcGIS Pro to be able to go and figure out exactly how to go and do this. So what questions, what comments do we have on this? Again, if you're not dealing with some of the issues with annotation, you can continue like you're going. But my point is that sooner or later, if you're in a hybrid type of organization where you have ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro, you're going to struggle with this. As this newer technology starts getting implemented, you have to figure out how to go and make it work for your organization on here. I'm going to be quiet for a minute. So Mike, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's certainly an option that we'll have to consider. I think we've already decided that we're going to have to drop some of our annotation features and go to labels in some degree. And in some cases that makes sense, right? Like, I mean, we have parcel acreage that should be tied to the land records assessment acreage, so that there's no discrepancies. Tax key too, right? I mean, I'm sure there's situations where we have a tax key number annotation that doesn't match the parcel. So, I mean, use labels and that problem goes away. It's just a matter of whether, you know, you've got me thinking about dimensions. You know, whether or not we want to go this route, I've got some experimentation to do to see if this can really be a viable solution and produce a quality, you know, 200 scale or 400 scale map that our real property listers office would use.
And when you're doing that, I think I would suggest don't do it on your entire database. Just take a region, take one map, and see if you can do that. And because it is a process, you're not going to be able to capture everything right away. You're not even sure whether the annotation you have in there is really reflective of it anymore. You know, what changes have occurred on there. So, you know, just do that and see if you can do this. See if you can replicate that existing map as much as possible.
Yeah, again, I mean, it seems like ESRI is telling us that annotation is a thing of the past, and we need to move on. And my editing experience has played that out. So, yeah, we need to figure out something.
Yeah, I agree. It is something that almost all of our clients are struggling with. How do you go and do this? And I wanted to go and offer some options, some alternatives, and some of the things that we've experimented with. I can tell you, actually, this client here, they said, oh, you're right, we do have to find an alternative to annotation because they are in a hybrid organization. They can't fully migrate everything over to ArcGIS Pro. And because of that, they can't edit their annotation anymore. So how are they going to do this? How are they going to keep their annotation updated if they're going to be using an ArcGIS Parcel Fabric? Right now, there's no way for them to do this. So again, we talked about, well, maybe you start transitioning some of this over into some sort of labeling option. And maybe it's that the old ArcMap, they have to use that static ArcMap annotation feature class and recognize they're not going to get updated. But now maybe start using labels or some sort of transition in here, because we are in a different type of environment here now. Something that we're not quite sure how we're going to make this transition in here. Yep. Any other opinions on this? I can tell you, and I'm hoping, I'm looking. Do we have anybody here from Oregon? I had invited somebody here from Oregon who's working with ArcMap right now. They are doing some pretty interesting things right now with cartography. When you look at their parcel fabric, you think it's an old ArcMap map document that you're looking at, but in fact it's the parcel fabric with the cartographic elements they put in there and such. They're doing some pretty amazing things. Go ahead, Paulette.
Well, I just wondered if anybody has, like, for me, I'm going to actually start this in Pro. So has anybody actually started it in Pro? so they know, because I have no idea what you're even looking at or what you're doing from a map view.
So you're talking about starting the parcel fabric?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So am I
And
going to run into this or I'm not? Because I don't even have any of this yet.
yeah, you're not going to run into it if you don't use annotation. But what we're talking about is that historically, the way parcel mappers have managed pieces of text inside of there, it has come, again, if we follow the whole thread, where did we start? Once we started putting them on computers, we started using pieces of text in AutoCAD files. And then
Yeah, and
those
I would have
pieces
had it featured linked.
right. Well,
in
even with feature linked, it's
Yeah.
a piece of text with all sorts of all sorts of attribution using GIS terminology about where it's placed and what font it is and what rotation it is. But it was a piece of text and it would be linked to a line.
Yeah.
Inside, as you move through that, what's been happening is that the different releases of software have different structures, and you've had to go and upgrade that structure, and that structure isn't always carrying over those references or those linkages on there.
Oh.
And so you lose some of that. So suddenly your text would no longer be feature linked. Then you would just have pieces of text that you have to go and manage. And as you transition into the newer technologies, then you have to start thinking about, well, we're no longer working off of file-based database systems, but maybe we're working off of client server, or maybe we're working off of web services, which is what the newer technology is. And how does web services manage this annotation? The answer is not real well right now. So how do we handle it? How do we transition this? How do we still get pieces of text on our map so that we can create something that looks good without it necessarily having to deal with some of the issues right now that we're still trying to work through?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so those three different things that you showed, the dim label, dim code, and dim side,
right.
How are you showing, like, are you got a definition query or something on those cartographic layers? Like, how are you showing those?
So the dim code stuff, that's really not on a cartographic layer, that's on the line layer. Line layer that's associated with my parcel polygons. And
so
what
can
I
I see
on
that
there,
code?
what I have on there is that, and let's go and show this here. On here, I actually have.
Oh, so you can do more than one.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I've got this label class that says that if my dim code is ditto, just go and put a double quote in. This is actually one of Arcade's text formatting global elements in here, where it just said put a double quote in there. All right. Or go, if it's not ditto, then go ahead and put the string value that's stored inside of the dim label and use that for dimensioning on here. That's really what this is. And then I've got multiples of these. This one is if I have it above the line, so I can tell it to.
So those are label classes. So you can add as many label classes as you want?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Label class. You can add the label classes on here and then tell it where you want to go and put this. Now why am I not? Here it is above the line here. And when I click on this one, it says below the line. So I can tell it where to put it, how far to offset it, where along the line I want to go and put it, at best, at the start, at the end, whether I want to remove duplications of lines. Again, the GIS utilizes a rule-based labeling engine. This is Maplex, which is a rule-based engine that I tell it all these rules. And I say, if
Yeah.
If it's set to be ditto, just put a ditto in there. Otherwise, put the value here and then place it. Make it this big, place it along here somewhere, and put it above the line, put it below the line, all sorts of options on there.
Yeah, no, that makes my life better because I was like, how am I going to make, more than one option?
Yeah, and it's through multiple label classes. I'm sorry.
Okay, cool.
Hey, Frank.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Couple things regarding the labeling in Victoria's comments. One, I'm pretty sure that you're not using Maplex at this moment. And two, with Maplex, you can force labels to be halfway down the line, which might help get the ditto marks exactly in line like Victoria wants.
You were correct that I was not using Maplex at that time. I was using the standard mapping engine. So thank you, Mark. I had assumed that I had set this up for Maplex, but it wasn't. But yeah, so you can, with Maplex, you can do some very advanced placements of these on here. So let's see if we can actually go and do this. Let's use placement here, and we best position before the end, after the end, somewhere along best position, offset along the line. Measure the offset. There's the positions along on here. Not
Yep,
quite
you
sure.
can do along the line from the start, and that'll open up a measure to center of label and distance 50%.
Thank you. All right, so now if I go and do this, and I take these two here, and I make them dittos. There you go. Thank you, Mark. All right, so yeah. Thank you, Mark. I'm so glad you joined. So it's again, it's using the technology, not just carrying forth what we used to have in there. But it is an effort to go and make sure that you take all of those dimensional values. What's here? What do I have for dimensions? In this case, it's actually picked up the closest point to this line here was this 270. So we want to make sure that this now actually reflects the 115 in here more than the others. All right. So there is cleanup. There's no doubt about it. There's work to be done on this, but it's one of those things where in the overall scope of things, you do it once and that's it. And you can let the map be pretty efficient in what it's doing. For example, here, I could tell it take these lines in here and put them all below the line. So it's not like, with annotation, you pick them and then you move them and you go from there. And this is just setting the attribution for those. Other comments?
That's one thing I'm really going to miss is in ArcMap, you've got a line for each parcel, and I do everything clockwise, and I tell it to label it on the right-hand side. So like you've got those 4 right there with the short lines. Well, if the big parcel on the other side had one long line up there, you'd have that total length on the other side.
And to be candid, I kind of miss that too. So within the parcel fabric, there's actually 2 ways that lines are defined. It depends upon how you built that line as far as what actually gets built on here. If you go in here, and this is a parcel fabric, so let's go ahead and build this in here. If I go in here and I create a record and start actually building lines on here, if I go to create, let's go back over here, and let's just create, where am I? This is backwards here. Let's just create a parcel using polygons. All right. So with a parcel fabric, the parcel fabric is sort of set up to go and look at the rules that we have established for this parcel. And our rules say that a polygon has to have lines on it, and then those lines have to have corners on the ends of them. And right now, this polygon has nothing. It has no lines, has no corners on the end of it. I can tell it to go ahead and build this. And when I tell it to build this, it will go and automatically generate those lines for me. All right, and those points. Make sure that I'm in here. Go ahead. So I now have lines on these, and each one of these sides has a line associated with it. So now if I go in here and I create a new record to create a new parcel. All right, let's 421. Come on, there we go. Okay, 421. And I go in here and I create a new polygon. Create a new polygon and build that thing out. It will actually have two lines here. Let's go ahead and do this. And let's verify it and prove it. Take this out, take this out. I only have one line. I thought I switched over to a different record on here. Create a record. New record. Come on. Um, 422. So now if I create this by building lines, that's what it was. It saw that I had already used a line and it didn't need it. Create a seed. Build my parcel. Now when I go and I build this, let's clear this out, say, show me everything associated with this. And I should have 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. When I go in here, I should have 2 lines in here. So the point I'm getting at is it depends upon how you build this parcel. So here, I'm going to use another record. I'm going to create lines. I'm going to just create a bunch of lines here. All right, I'm going to create seeds. Shows 3 different seeds in there. I'm going to go and build these. When I do it this way, I should have 1 line there. 1 line to rule them both. So again, the ArcGIS Parcel Fabric has 2 different ways that you can use lines. One is what they call a shared line. If it's created at the same time or is used to create a polygon, it doesn't create a new polygon. So it creates one line between there. Now, with certain type of parcels, that's the way it should work. For example, if I'm building a subdivision and I have lots, those lots should only have one line between them. All right. They should only have one line. They shouldn't have two lines on them. But if I'm doing transactions like tax parcels, each of those tax parcels should have its own set of lines. Again, the reason it didn't have it is because I built a polygon instead of building lines in there. And it all analyzed and said, you already had a line here, you don't need it. But if I had built it with lines, it would have its own set of lines. Those are called overlapping lines on here. So within the parcel fabric, you have shared lines or you have overlapping lines. So you can't always be sure of what the relationship is between the lines and the polygons like you could inside of the ArcMap one. That's one of the things I miss. And one of the things that when you're doing the migration, you're not always sure which types of lines you're getting with it. Sometimes you're getting shared lines. Sometimes you're getting overlapping lines. You have to watch out for that. But I agree, Bob. I kind of like having one set of lines for every single parcel. But I do know that they had a lot of people complain about all of these lines that are being created. And that's one reason why they reset the way they build lines inside of here. Yeah.
Yeah, it does make a lot of lines, but I had a surveyor that did two parcels side by side a couple of years apart, and the line between the two was a different distance on each plat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
so I know they were going to the same pins, but
And that's, I'm going around in my head is I think some of the next things I want to start talking about is not necessarily the technology part of it, but this whole concept of why is parcel mapping so complex? Why is it so complex? And the reason is that we're attempting to apply a scientific or a technical approach to doing things when it really isn't true. For example, this whole concept of ownership, the fact that we honestly really don't own any land. What we own is we own the right to use the land. All right. And if you go all the way back to England, the lords and the manors never gave the peasants the right to own the land. They only gave them the right to use the land. And that's exactly the sort of type of ownership that we have here in the United States. We have a right to use the land, but we can't pick it up and carry it somewhere else and put it over there. This is something that we just have the right to use it. And we have varying degrees of rights. We have a right to build on it, or we could have, a right to go and put something across it. We could have a right to go and walk across it. We could have a right to drain it. There's a lot of different rights that we have. And there's a misconception as far as what real land ownership is and how it can impact what we're actually mapping and what we're actually doing on there. Again, this is something that's rattling around, especially since my last talk with Nancy. We've got to find a way to better communicate with both the general public and even to our people that are mapping what they're really doing. Things like a meets and bounds description. Those dimensions that are shown, they're really just guides to tell them you have to go to the monument. You don't have to go to this distance or this bearing even. That's just to point you and get you in the general direction of wherever that original surveyor established that original corner. That's really what defines the limits of the ownership is where is that corner? I could describe it many different ways. I could say go easterly for around 100 feet to wherever that corner is. And that's a perfectly legitimate way. And some would argue that's a more accurate way than going and putting, degrees, minutes, and tenths of a second, and then measuring it out to 3 decimal places. That might be a precise way of measuring and defining somebody's land, but that's not a very accurate way of doing it. So again, it's rattling around in my head. How do we go and do this? And is this the next thing I have to start talking about or should start talking about? Land records are very interesting. There's some interesting components to it. Anyway, we're on 90 minutes already. So to sum this up, we know that there's issues with annotation, especially with hybrid environments. We know there's got to be some better way of doing some of these things. Is adapting over to labels, especially now that we have very, very sophisticated rule-based labeling engines out there, is that a better way of doing things? And then what do we have to do to make that transition out of those old dumb, stupid pieces of text that just sit on our map into something where we can begin to analyze it. We can begin to go and set rules for it. So it's more sophisticated and what it does do and how it reacts to what we're doing. That's really what I wanted to do today, was show you and sort of talk through some of these things and get some feedback. I suspect this might be the way we're going with some of these things. We're seeing more and more of our clients looking at this sort of an approach. The pain of going to a dentist is you have to do it one time. You have to get there and you have to go and do it. You have to make that change. But if you do it right the first time, it doesn't hurt anymore. It's only when you try to take shortcuts that you have recurring pain going on there. All right, I'm going to stop the recording and open up what we call. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.